Welcome back to JRL Golf Academy. In this episode, I was able to do an interview with none other than Rick Sessinghaus. Rick Sessinghaus is the mental coach and swing coach to Colin Morikawa, who's now on a 21 streak cuts made on the PGA Tour. He talks about junior development. That's why I had my own little guy in here. He did a great segment on how people learn how to bring up juniors and a whole host of other topics that we went over. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of JRL Golf Academy. McKay. Good morning there, Rick Sessinghaus with one less S.
It's been spelled many ways throughout the year, so no worries.
I'm so sorry about that.
No worries.
My Bluetooth's not working. All right. We're going to get a couple more people in here, bud.
Awesome.
They're coming in. Morning Titleist man number one. Woody's Impact. Packlack's back. Good to see you back. Thanks for coming back. How you doing, Rick?
I'm wonderful. How about you?
I'm good. How's the whole quarantine thing going with you guys?
I've got 3 kids here, so it's active at best, and getting some other projects done. But I'm wishing the best for everybody because it's a challenging time.
It really is a challenging time. I can't believe. Were you surprised the British Open canceled so quick?
Yeah, I had kind of heard rumors that they potentially wanted the September date that the U.S. Open kind of swooped in on. So I don't know if they were holding out, but then I think they had not many other options once that domino fell.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha. I'd heard that there was even talks of moving the U.S. Open to maybe Pebble or Torrey Pines. There was talks of that going on. So that was kind of interesting that I didn't know if they were trying to cancel early and thinking everybody else was going to cancel. I don't know.
I don't know. You want obviously everybody to be safe, but you know, what's the first domino that's going to fall? Which sporting organization's going to put on the first live event?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, everyone's all rolling in here. My guest today is none other than Rick Sessinghaus. Rick, thanks for coming on board. I think you're most known for obviously your mental prowess, but I think a lot of people don't realize also that you've been in the trenches teaching. You taught for a long time as well, right?
You bet. I've been teaching for now 26 years. Member of the PGA. I've done all the swing stuff, which I still enjoy. But the mental part is kind of where I really have honed in on.
Right. So, Rick, tell me about a little bit. Let's get some context. You playing junior golf? How old were you when you started in the game?
Just before I was 13, golf was about the 5th or 6th sport that I took up. I just enjoyed it for the summertime. I played one SCPGA junior event my whole junior career.
Are you
played
serious?
On the high school team? Yeah, but then other sports started to kind of go away, and then I got hurt in my first year of football in high school. And that was kind of the reality check of, well, one, I wasn't good enough to go to another level and wasn't going to be big enough. And I just fell in love with golf when I was about 16 years old and just got obsessed with it, as many of us, as coaches have, and just loved it so much. And then started, became about an average player in high school, probably averaged, 38 on 9 holes for the high school team. But I was obsessed, and I wanted to play college golf. And so I, very long story, but walked on at Cal State Northridge. I did not make it the first time walking on. I did make it the other time, and then earned scholarship for the last 3 years, and was an average D1 player. Pretty good ball striker. Short game wasn't good enough, and then the mental game at times wasn't good enough, and that's kind of where I think started my process. And so, when I started coaching golf, I certainly got obsessed with golf swing stuff first. I think like a lot of coaches do, and trying to search for those secrets and all that stuff. And learned a ton about that. And then as I went along more and started learning more about the physical part of the game with, this is back in 2000 with a company called Body Balance for Performance, which was before kind of TPI. Had consulted with that company for a while, got to learn a little bit more about the physical fitness end of it. And so, but then the really part was just the mental side is, you and I get to see some really talented players that we don't understand why isn't not translating on their scores on the course as much. And that's what I become a little bit more obsessed with is performance on the course. And so I went back to school and got my master's and doctorate in applied sports psychology. And I love the personal development side and the psychology of performance. And so that's kind of where I spend most of my time researching, and very passionate about that side of the game.
So let me ask you this. What's interesting, Rick and I actually, we've never met in person, but we're always around the same circles, which cracks me up to the point that we even share a student with Maddie. Like Rick does all my encore stuff, and I sit on the range with Maddie. I think it's awesome, and it takes a team, right?
It really does, and that's what I appreciate about our community is we have people who are experts, but I think we also have some coaches that are willing to put the egos aside and help the student. And that comes through with you tremendously because, when I talk to Maddie and we get to do some stuff on the course, I'm always asking, hey, what are you and John working on? And she always has a big smile on her face because, she's seen improvements with how far the ball's going and she's seen improvements with certain things like that. And then I said, great, now how are we going to apply it now in different situations on the golf course and under pressure when, you really want to try hard when you shouldn't. But I think that's where, not to get off on a tangent, but I think that's where golf instruction is going, is more of a team environment. I know it obviously on tour it's that way, but I think we're seeing at college and now junior levels is putting those teams together, which is I think is fantastic as long as the coaches put their egos aside.
You know what? And I think that like exactly what you're saying is that there's more consultation going on, I think today more than ever in terms of, hey, Rick, what do you think about what I'm doing with this person? And I hear that even on tour. There's teachers that will go to other teachers and be like, dude, I'm like struggling with this, or hey, what do you think about this with my player? And it could be X, Y, or Z, but they're putting down the egos because at the end of the day, we're just trying to help the person. We're trying to get the best information we can because as teachers, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing a person get whatever you're trying to explain to them, right?
No question. And I certainly, I would say 50% of my business now is mental game only. And I'm, of course, working with a client who has a great swing instructor like yourself. And I'm there to sometimes be the hub and kind of help put pieces together of their fitness program and nutrition. And so I always ask, what are they working on with that instructor without any judgment? Because I know they're working with somebody very good. But here's where I try to catch the student is I want to make sure they're actually applying what the coach is telling them. That doesn't always happen.
I know what you mean. I'm so glad you do that because you got to keep the student as well accountable, right?
Definitely.
Just coming to a lesson, isn't, I get some students and stuff like that. They come to a lesson and you, I'm sure you have to, where they think, okay, well, you're just going to fix whatever I can do and I don't have to really think about it anymore. If I come here for that one lesson, I should be fixed, right?
Well, yeah, or they kind of remember the lesson. They said, well, yeah, kind of, we did this. And I go, wait a second. I'm sure they gave you some drills. I'm sure there was some practice involved. And then you just see that disconnect. You go, uh-oh. So it doesn't really matter who they're working with.
Yes.
They're not not applying the great information and the great coaching they got to. And so sometimes that's a disconnect to begin with. Because I've had some people come to me and I said, hey, who's your coach or whatever? And I know they're a really good coach. I said, what are you working on right now? And they're saying, I'm not sure. And I go, whoa, now we can, as coaches, we can take responsibility for that too. We need to communicate sometimes better. We need to hold people accountable, but in of itself, that student now needs to be held accountable, like you're saying. And it's like, wait a second, I think that, and so sometimes I'll have talks with the coach and say, hey, I just saw so-and-so and they're a little confused with what you guys are working on. Oh, I told them to do da-da-da. So, I've been on the other side of the coin too. So
that's the beauty about Rick. I mean, Rick has literally been on every side of the fence. So There's nothing that Rick hasn't done or seen, which is I think is amazing. Um, Rick, can you tell me? Obviously, your famous student is Colin Morikawa. Colin Morikawa, at being at Angeles National Golf Club in Sunland, there, I literally got to see this kid throughout the years, growing from when he was a little kid.
Yeah.
And I never really spoke to him that much. I say hi and stuff like that because he was one of those kids that you see that are different. Like he was on the range focused. You know what I mean? It was like he was there to do a task and he knew what he had to do. So I mean, I understand what he's doing because I did the same thing, and I never wanted to get in their space when they're really focusing. So I never got that close to Colin, but I'd see him wave and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, you know, he was very focused at a young age, and I got to think a lot of that had to do with your help as well, obviously. But could you talk about how you met him and sort of the progression of bringing him up? Because there's a lot of parents in here right now watching and a lot of coaches. I can tell this and I'd be a testament for you about how you brought this player up. I believe was really correct. So people might want to know, like, hey, what did you do to bring this player up the way you did?
Well, no, thank you. And, you know, as coaches, we get very fortunate that certain students come into our lives. Okay. So I want to put that very out there. I'm very grateful for the opportunity with not only Colin, but so many wonderful students throughout the years. So I was teaching at the time and still am, but at the time it was at Shoal Canyon Golf Course in Glendale. And his father came up to me. He was 8 years old. His father came up and said, hey, you know, I think my son is ready for some private lessons. He'd been taking some group lessons, and, you know, we've heard some good things that you work with some, you know, more advanced juniors. And I go, oh, great, bring him on over. And I saw him swing, and I said, you bet, I'll work with him.
I'm in.
So, and what I mean by that, and you know this, is I saw, of course, a very natural, fundamental golf swing. He's athletic, good hand-eye coordination. So he had started when he was like 2 years old and had some really good, solid fundamentals with group instruction. But, you know, he was at a stage not only physically, but also mentally and emotionally to have one-on-one lessons now. So sometimes an 8-year-old, they don't need one-on-one lessons yet. They still need to be group. Okay? But he was ready. So we started at that age, and I believe, and I've said this on some other interviews, the key couple differences with how I teach is I do a lot of on-course stuff. And so half of our lessons from the age of 8 to 18 were done on the golf course. Okay. And he would see me once a week. And then there was about a 5-year period where I moved to Chevy Chase Country Club, which is this fun little 9-hole golf course. He was a member there, and there is no driving range. Okay. There's a net. So
I remember when you went there.
Yeah. So, and that was it's a blessing in disguise for you coaches and your parents that we actually didn't have a range to work at. But it was always my philosophy to coach golf, which meant playing golf. And in that, I can certainly see ball flights and those type of things, but we were very much into situational. I'm a big believer in what I call pattern. Well, I don't call it, but it's pattern recognition, right? Can a player recognize the pattern in that moment? Now, a pattern could be, what is this lie going to do, right? What is this this green and how receptive it is, and all these patterns. Now, the more experience we have, we can recognize patterns a lot quicker. So my role as a coach is to try to create as many situations with me, of course, guiding of how they're going to perceive that pattern. So a basic lesson would be throwing 3 balls in a situation. He would pick the first shot of how he wanted to do it. If it didn't come off how he wanted to, he got to choose a second option. And then finally, I would give him my third option. So I was kind of reversing it. I wanted him to be able to coach himself and then ask questions instead of me telling him what he needed to do. Because I'll be honest with you, early on in my career, I would tell people what to do, and I wasn't coaching them. Do this, do that, put the ball position here, open up the club face. And what I found working with better and better players is sometimes they have a better solution than I have. And so if I open it up to them and say, hey, how do you look at this golf shot? And they go, oh, I'm going to put the ball back in stance with an open club face with leaning into it. I go, I never would have thought about that way. And they hit it to like 2 inches, right? I go, right. So now instead of me telling them, they're again learning. And they're helping me learn. But so that's how a lot of our lessons were. The other thing is that his father was with us every single lesson. And I say that because it was an extremely positive relationship. He trusted me. He had questions when needed to clarify things, because he'd be with Colin maybe at Brookside or Angeles or somebody hitting balls. He wanted to make sure that Colin at that young age understood what I was asking. And he was just there, a good support system throughout. The thing that I do want to clarify is that Colin does have a mindset that was already with him. I believe my job was to cultivate that. I don't take credit for teaching him to be a certain way. I've cultivated certain things that he already had. And I've helped him understand patterns, not only in his golf swing, but in mindset and how he deals with certain situations. He was wired in a pretty special way already.
So when you're saying patterns, would you say that to this day, when he's still playing, he's still paying attention to his mental patterns in terms of, hey, where was I at mentally on this shot when I hit this shot? Or would you say he does that?
More so than even the physical, to be honest with you. So
really?
One thing that I'm a big proponent of is post-shot routines. So a lot of people, and I was one of them in college, I was a hothead, hit a bad shot, slam a club, say a few choice words. And that was, right, frustration, right? And I did a very poor job of processing poor shots. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about with emotions. But so I would just blame myself and you suck, Rick, and oh my God, you're horrible, blah, blah, blah. But what I learned is not all those bad shots, I would just blame my golf swing. Oh my God, the ball went left, you snap hooked it, you came under plane. Why did you do that, right? And I found out later on that not all of those poor shots were physical. Some of them were mental. Some of them were lack of commitment. Some of them were I was nervous. So I was in between clubs. I never quite made a clear target. And then that has a physiological response. You get stressed, you get nervous, your tempo gets quicker, your grip pressure tenses up. Your golf swing is going to change.
Yeah.
So that is what I learned early is now I want my players to do post-shot routines to be in a learning mode instead of emotional mode. So if we look at, we'll just use an example of a round with Colin, and we always do post-round analysis, and it's not about how could you shoot whatever. It was, what did you learn from today? What did you do well today? And then sometimes, hey, Rick, I was talking to my caddy, JJ. We were in between clubs of an 8 and a 9. I decided to trap a 9-iron, and you know what? I pulled it a little bit into that bunker. Now, him missing a green is rare, and with a 9-iron is very rare. But was that a physical or mental error? And sometimes it was a mental error that he would have been best doing what he actually does quite well, which is shape a slight little 8-iron with a little baby cut. That would be a shot he's more committed to. So we go into a mode more of, was he in the correct mental state before to execute the shot first? That's our first question. Then if the answer is yes, and he gets a poor shot, then we look at some mechanical stuff that he tends to get into. He gets the club head a little outside on takeaway, gets a little steeper, pulls a shot. Okay. So, but I don't go to that first. Okay. And he doesn't go to that first, because one of our main goals, process goals, is to commit to 100% of golf shots. Now, that might be a stretch because that's kind of a perfection goal. But for those competitive players out there, if you could honestly commit to 80% of your golf shots, I think that is awesome. Okay. When you really think about commitment.
What percentage? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I'm just trying to minimize mental breakdowns first. Okay. Because I think those are actually easier to change than physical. And then I'm looking again at patterns. Well, years ago, but we understood that when he was under, we'll call it pressure, he tended to overthink pre-shot routines. So he wanted to be now perfect. So now you start thinking too much. That might not be advantageous to hit a great golf shot. So we had to keep the pacing of the routines similar. When he got on tour with his caddy and I, all three of us would have discussions about pacing of a routine, and when enough thinking is enough thinking, right? Yeah. Because a lot of us, everybody has default modes under pressure. And some of us now overthink of trying to make a perfect decision and what's the perfect yardage and and that gets in the way of being an athlete and being creative, which is his he's awesome when he's in a creative mode instead of a perfectionistic mode.
That's pretty interesting. What percentage do you think Colin is in that pre-shot routine, or mentally he's in the right space? Like you said, 80%, right? What do you think where do you think he is when it comes to that, when he's playing well versus not playing well?
I think again, this is a huge strength of his. Is I would say 95%. He's committing to off shots. Okay, and we've had discussions with, when we look at performance, we look at stats. We get all the stats we ever want with the PGA Tour, and we start to try to uncover again back to patterns. Is hey, you had let's say you had 2-3 putts that day. Now we don't automatically say, oh, your putting was bad. We would just say, Colin, can you describe to me what happened on, let's say, hole 3? You had a 35 footer. He may say, hey, Rick, I did not commit to that putt because of speed control. And you know what? I left it 6 feet short. And then he missed the 6 footer. So instead of saying the putting was bad, we actually look at one putt and it was a speed thing. It happened a little bit at the waste management. The greens started to get a little glassy, and there was a little disconnect between how fast they were and really what they were. So the stroke was no different, right? But the intention of target was different because he wasn't quite sure of speed. Well, when you're not sure of something, you're not committed. So some of it's shot dependent, but he is very, very good with his mental game. And again, the other thing you have to look at is he's quite consistent. So here's 21 cuts in a row, and he has the longest cut streak right now on tour. He shows up every single round. Now, sometimes, does he get frustrated a little bit with the 3-putt? Yeah, sure. But I guarantee there's going to be a birdie coming up the next hole or the hole after. He bounces back quite well. So he does have great, some great mental skills. I think even some really good college players, again, if they get to 80% commitment throughout a round, I think they're doing quite well when they're really honest with themselves with the commitment.
Now, how would you do that? I mean, I know there's like a mental scorecard. How would you go about doing that if you're trying to track that?
Yeah, I think so. I go from very broad, and then I go narrow. So after a tournament round, a player could either call me, or we do some stuff with forms that they're filling out post-round assessments, and it's just general at first. Hey, how committed were you to your strategy today, right? How committed were you to, and then we get into more of, was there specific times on the golf course where you were not committed? Now, then, something pops up real quick. Oh yeah, Rick, it was a dogleg right. I don't like to cut balls, and I just crisscross myself, and Okay. So now I'll use that situation and say, hey, what can we do next time about that? But to your point, yeah, it would be nice if they had a mental scorecard. But some of these college players are already asked to do so much with stats and stuff. I don't want to overwhelm them with how clear was your visualization and I go general first, but they'll tell me pretty quickly the shots they didn't like, and then we can kind of discuss those as we go.
So you might go to those highlight reels, even though they're not good shots. Let's go there and let's see where your mental was, and then kind of get like a sort of a percentage from that, possibly.
Yeah, and what I do a lot as a coach is I do a lot of comparing and contrasting. So I always ask somebody, hey, what was your best shots? What was your best holes? Those type of things. And then what do you believe led to that great shot? Now, sometimes they'll say, hey, the swing felt great. But other times they'll say, you know what? I saw that shot with such clarity. It's as if it already happened. I was so focused. And now I'm saying, see, we have some mental skills that are kicking in that are helping you commit to a shot. And that clarity helps you with confidence go with it. There's always this chicken or the egg, as you know, John, is that, the mental, the physical, the mental, and they're always working like this. But I think golfers are doing a disservice by always blaming their golf swing. Because you and I have seen them come to a lesson. Oh my God, I hit it all over the place. And then within 2 swings, you got them hitting it perfect. right?
Oh,
So it really
what
wasn't a
is
physical
that?
breakdown.
What is
I
that? Is
believe
that
it's called,
just confidence, us being there?
yeah, some of
Like,
it's confidence. I think I'm very much into what we call state dependent. Whatever state you're in, you're going to your performance is going to change.
okay.
So when they're with a good coach like you're going to keep them focused. They're going to have a very specific cue to work on. So they're not going to have as much as distraction. Okay, they're there to learn. They're motivated to learn. And then within a few shots, you get them relaxed. You get them going. You help their confidence certainly, because you can provide some of that because you're giving them a clear path. And then after the hour, they feel good about themselves. They have some clarity. Great. Well, that same state they were in, which is maybe relaxed and confident with you, is that same state occurring on the first tee at their college tournament? Maybe, maybe not, right? And so I'm always asking, again, comparing and contrasting, when you're at your best, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? And then when you're not quite at your best, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you doing? And there's usually a very contrasted answer to that, right? And
Yeah.
but I'm trying to figure out what triggers them from going from one side to the other is the fascination I have with the mental game. And I've heard, as you being a really good player, is if you look back at times when you didn't play your best, sometimes it had nothing to do with golf, period. It could be, hey, I got a midterm tomorrow, or my girlfriend just said something to me that I didn't like. Or those emotional things come into to play on the golf course, and that state changes literally our physical state too, right? Heart rate changes and all this kind of stuff. And so how can we expect that great tempo that they had in a lesson to be there on the course? Now, that's not even talking about the stuff like stress and anxiety of wanting to perform well and the fear and those things, which now spikes all this other stuff too. So I'm trying to get somebody to be in the same state day in and day out, round by round, shot by shot. And that's why we get into routines and certain things like that. But I do want everybody to know that everybody is different. Okay. So Colin's personality is different, and I'm not trying to change him. I work with some other very good players who are, I would say, more outgoing or more intense. Great. We have to find out what works, but I also want to know what would trigger you getting out of that. Okay. And sometimes it's results. We know a bad shot now triggers doubt, it triggers frustration, and those things now change us physically, but also mentally. So, there's an adage. I'm researching a lot of what's called flow state right now, and one of their first things is flow follows focus. Flow follows focus. So whatever you're focusing on is going to trigger us one way or the other. Okay, and so I think that's the thing that I'm always fascinated with is where's somebody's state on a shot by shot basis. And of course, can we train that? Which the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Do you have routines? Do you have things that can get you into that state more often? And this is back to pattern recognition. Can you recognize the patterns and the triggers that pull you out of that? Okay. It's just like with the physical side, when you get somebody who gets the club under plane, who flips it, that's a physical pattern. Okay. Yeah. And then you give them a couple drills, you do, and guess what? At that moment, it doesn't look like the pattern's there anymore. Yeah. Well, we know it's right underneath the surface.
Yep.
Okay. And it could show, but do they need to practice more? Possibly, right? They need to reinforce a good pattern. Totally get it. But under stress, we're going to tend to default to other patterns, both physically and mentally. And they don't always serve us, by the way.
Let me ask you this. What do you think when you're, let's just talk about a physical thing real quick. Like you were saying about the guy that gets under, or girl gets underneath and flips it, right?
Yeah.
And you said there, it was something that I believe in is that like, we can give them a drill and stuff like that and get out of it real quick and it's there. But the pattern that's most dominant is the one that's going to show up, right? In terms of a physical pattern.
I believe that, especially under stress.
So then it's our job, is let's just say as a swing coach, or the player, to do enough reps to make the new pattern the more dominant pattern, right? It's not that there can't ever come underneath it, because That'd be ridiculous, right? It'd be like, no, if I told him to get underneath it, he can get underneath it. But the pattern that we show up with is just the dominant pattern. And we're not trying to completely eliminate something. We're just trying to make the new pattern more dominant than the old pattern, right? In a learning aspect, is that correct?
Oh, I believe that certainly. I would also, and I'm not an expert on motor learning, so let me just put that right there. However, I do know learning is again state dependent. If I'm relaxed and calm and focused, I'm going to take information in a better way. My body's going to respond better than if I'm stressed and wonder if I'm going to have to get a self-critical voice and my coach is going to get mad. I mean, so the information could be said the same way, but the state of the learner is going to be different. And when we get into repetition type practice, I think again, when they're under your tutelage and you're watching them, and you can make another part of flow is giving them immediate feedback real quick and say, oh, you know what, that club was still a hair under. Let's get the right forearm here. And you give them that quick feedback. Yeah, that can help them refocus better on the pattern. And then at the end of the lesson, that's why we were joking before, is at the end of the lesson, are they very, very, very clear on what they're actually going to practice? Yes. And then what that state is, you know? And so, yes, we want to have enough repetition involved, but I want also the proper focus and emotional state for those repetitions to stick.
I gotcha. Thanks for watching, everybody, the JRL Golf Academy. Please make sure to link and comment down below. Make sure you subscribe and turn on that little bell for notifications. And we look forward to seeing you on the next JRL Golf Academy.